Welcome to New Game Plus. This is a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name is Kenny.
Nolan.
And this is Retro Recap 19.
If you haven't been here for the last 19 of these, welcome. Retro Recap is our chance every once in a while to just look back at our looking back. We take a time to go through the last 20-ish episodes and just get a little bit retrospective about what the episodes were like, whether we got it right, whether we missed it. It's a community-led week and always a fun time, and we look forward to it every time it comes around.
And we take a break and go to the lake.
Even if it's dead of winter.
Yeah. Oh, Lake Winter is best winter.
So the three of us will be at the lake in our skivvies this week, while our community members Garlyle, Shawna, and Klen lead this wonderful retro recap that is going to talk about games that are in the window that began with LSD Dream Emulator, not a game.
Not a game.
Not a game.
And that concludes with our most recent game and episode, Saturn Bomberman.
Is a game.
Not a game. Oh, wait. Sorry. I missed.
So there are both not games and games in this selection. Sit back, relax, enjoy as our friends talk about video gaming. Now.
Welcome to New Game Plus Plus, a retro gaming podcast where three fans spend 20 weeks listening to one podcast, where three guys spend 7 days playing one game, and then they talk about it, and then we talk about it. I'm not Dustin, I'm Garlyle.
And I'm not Kenny, I'm Shawna.
I'm not Nolan, I'm Klen.
And this is Retro Recap 19, but you knew that by now from our host's intro. 20 games, 20 episodes, well, okay, 21 Christmas casts snuck in there, including some directors and even a rare guest episode. But since we're not the usual, let's go around, introduce ourselves proper, and ask a special community question of the week. If you could give the guys any game to play, but unlike a normal Patreon pool or director's episode or whatever, had to be one you hate. And I mean not just like one that disappoints you, I mean one that gets you worked up. What game would you put the guys through and why? Shawna, why don't you start?
Okay, so I'm going to have my best Kenny answer for this one. Also, hi, everyone. You should know me by now. I'm Shawna. I've been with the community for many, many years and have had the pleasure of co-hosting with Klen and Garlyle these recaps. Okay, so I had to think long and hard about this one. I have a current title or non-retro title, and then I have like a retro title, if that's okay.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. Okay, so my current title, one that actually makes me really, really mad, I'm sorry to say, is Harvestella, which was like the Square Enix farm simulator game that I was really excited about like a year and a half ago. The game's horrible. It's literally horrible.
No.
It's horrible.
Oh.
I even tried to, when I used to like do my gaming channel, like I believe it's on there. It was so bad. I think I put 20 hours into it. It never got good. And so I had to like walk away from it. So I would submit that one when the time is right for it to become retro. And then my second answer, a more retro game, and it's not actually a game that I hate, but I think that a lot of other people would hate it, is a little game, a little PC title called Redneck Rampage.
I don't think I know that one.
I have not heard of that.
But it doesn't sound inspiring.
It's horrible in the sense that you're just the stereotypical redneck, and it's kind of like a first-person shooter, and there's like potty mouth stuff, and you run around with like a shotgun, and you just kind of, it's like Red Dead Redemption, but with like, I don't know, like Coors Light or something. I don't know. It's like not an appropriate game, and I feel like people would hate it, but I love it. But I think everyone else would hate it.
I guess for me, I definitely have a modern game I would love to see them talk about, even just like on an Elements episode, like if they, decided
What's
to do
that?
one. I don't know. It's a myth. I would love to see them cover Tunic in any degree. That is a game that I was so frustrated with. I have like a hate review on my YouTube channel. Some of the other games I really hate, they've already played. Like Zelda 2, I really disliked. Symphony of the Night, I actually really disliked. And they've played both of them. Maybe Super Mario Brothers 2 would be another choice. Because I've never gotten along with that game. I just don't like anything about it.
Klen out here with the spicy takes today. And to wrap up, I'm Garlyle as usual, and my pick would be a little DS game called Lunar Dragon Song, which sounds like it's the sequel to a game the guys actually enjoyed, and I mean, technically it is, and you look at it at first and you're like, oh, this is a JRPG. I guarantee you it's the worst JRPG I've ever played, and I have been playing the genre in 30 years. It is a game that somehow gets worse and worse the further you go. It's almost impressive.
Oh, no.
And I hate it. And listen, if you're not on the Discord, discord.gg/newgameplus, by the way, you should come by. In the latest episode discussion channel, we've got a thread specifically for answers to this question, and I cannot wait to hear about all the evils you've all been too polite to unleash on the guys.
But also,
now-
please don't.
No, please do.
And now,
No, because then we have to talk about them.
yeah, that's true. We'll suffer through it too for you. And now, pop quiz. Not about games we would play, but games we have played. What's the oldest game we're covering in this batch?
I'm gonna say Gold Rush.
Okay, that's a good one. I was going to say Russian Attack.
Russian Attack is correct by a couple years. What's the newest game?
Stubbs the Zombie, I believe.
Yeah, I think I agree. I
Actually-
agree.
It's actually 2007's Hotel Dusk. What console was the most played? And this one might be easy because there's only been a couple.
It's either NES or PC, and I'm not sure which to go with. I think I'm gonna say PC.
I think I'm
That
going to
would be
say...
correct.
Oh, PC. I was going to say PlayStation.
Surprisingly, no, it only had a couple games this time.
Yeah, it only had a couple
Never
games.
wins.
No, because we had a lot of disc systems, but they were a lot of different disc systems. Like we had Dreamcast, we had Sega Saturn.
That's
Very
true.
And speaking of awful games to put the guys through, of the 17 recent games, 8 of them got NGP, and only 5 of them were unanimously NGP. So I'm curious, which host do you think was the most positive and the most negative this time?
Ooh.
Most positive was Kenny, and least
Yeah.
positive was Nolan.
I'm going to say most positive was Kenny, least positive was Dustin.
Klen is right on this one. It was Kenny Kenny said yes to 10 games, but Nolan only said yes to 6.
Wow, 6?
I just kept seeing Nolan on the no column as I was checking off. I'm like, wow, Nolan he's had a bad time.
Yeah.
Indeed. Anyway, let's stop deploying long slide Let's stop deploying long slide diversions. Lollygagging, stalling, done. Anyway, if that confusing intro didn't send you completely out of the episode, The first game that we're talking about is LSD Dream Emulator, the 1998 PS1 title brought to us at the end of the Summer of Weird by Retroman. Though whether the Summer of Weird ended at this point, we were discussing shortly before the show, global warming may have just extended the summer to the entire rest of the year at this point. We got some weird ones to talk about, but honestly, I don't think any of them are going to top this one.
No, I agree. I think that we really kicked off the last quarter of the year with just this weird title. If you've not seen screenshots of it or anything, it seemed like it. Imagine it's a 1998 screensaver that was like programmed onto a potato. It's about that. Klen liked it.
I liked it. I was the only one, but I liked it. It's a fever dream wrapped in like a loose video game mechanics. And that's about it. But I had fun. It was nice to just like unplug, enjoy like running around and seeing the weird stuff.
But did you really see the weird stuff? Like, trying not to be funny, but it really looks like an MS Paint. Like, it's so low fidelity, it's hard to make out what you're even looking at.
It is really low fidelity, but then it's like you'll be walking around and there'll be nothing, and there's an area where it's like a seaside warehouse district, and then I wandered into one of the warehouses and there's a bloody dead body and like a chalk outline. And I walked up to it, and it faded out and faded me into a different area.
Yeah,
Fun.
there's some kind of interesting stuff in there, although like finding it can be really difficult sometimes because it's very randomly, like, not necessarily completely from the ground up randomization, but there's a whole lot of random elements and randomness to the connections of areas and stuff. As opposed to, Dustin mentioned, like, maybe he'd like the idea of this if it had a bit more purpose. And the closest game, the only game I can think of to compare this to is, like, Yume Nikki, which is kind of a famous, like, dream exploration. But the dreams are static and, like, deliberately connected, and there's all sorts of, like, more purpose and structure to it. And I'd be curious if the guys would like that one.
Probably not.
I would, okay, well, along those same lines, I would argue that it would be more enjoyable if it was more like high fidelity to look at as well. Because I think part of what makes it either really fun, like Klen saying it's like a fever dream where you really don't know what's going on. And I can understand parts of that being really interesting. I think that like now, if we were to release the game in like, 2025 and have it be just as weird, but have it be high fidelity, I think that it would probably gain a lot more traction with people.
It's one of those things like you wouldn't release as a commercial product today. It would be like a store or like an art exhibit would have it as an interactive experience.
Yeah, like you're right. It's kind of like a Meow Wolf kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's a point that they made during the episode, was that it was very much like looking at art. But that's interesting. The first play is really fun too. If you've not seen the first play episode, Dustin does it. And it's very confusing to him, and watching him try to navigate this game. He has like no time for the nonsense in the game. So it's pretty funny to watch. All right, moving on. So the next game we played was a director's episode with Scotty. And it was let's see. Sorry. It was a 2005 Xbox or PC title, Stubbs the Zombie in Rebel Without a Pulse.
What an incredibly 2005 title. Let's be
Isn't
real.
it?
Like,
It's
not
the best.
like literally in terms of what it is called as a game, but also just in terms of how it played. The guys mentioned on the episode, like, oh, this was built with the Halo engine. I'm like, oh, That explains everything.
Well, I think definitely back then, like, Xbox, of course, like everything was built on the Halo engine, right? I really liked this game. I played this when it first released, like way back in the day, because remember I was like one of the 4 people that had an Xbox originally. And I liked it because it kind of reminded me of The Sims 2, the way that the characters were designed. So I don't know, it has like Sims 2 vibes to me, so that's why I liked it. But also, you can't go wrong with a fun zombie game.
I'm just fine. I didn't really fall in love with it either, but it was totally serviceable. Great
I don't know. I
B
think,
movie humor.
yeah, it's like, I don't know. I like a tongue-in-cheek kind of goofy game, and I feel like we don't often get those like tongue-in-cheek games. So when we do get them, I think that I get really excited about them. They remind me a lot of like the old Bullfrog entertainment games. If you remember Bullfrog, like they were the ones that
Oh yeah.
brought us the hospital simulator, and I think it was like Theme Park, the original ones from like the
Yep.
mid 90s. So they have that kind of humor to them. So whenever we have something like Stubbs where it's like a little bit more tongue in cheek, and I get more excited about it, especially when we have like, we have to bleep it out, but the fart attack that you get to be a zombie.
Can't believe you said the F word.
I
on
know,
the
I know,
podcast.
I know. But I told
We
Dustin
get one.
ahead of time.
We get one.
Yeah, yeah. I told him that I was going to say it.
Our next game, Shawna, are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Because we got the 7-Up, baby. It's still here.
Klen has a bottle of 7-Up, and they're cracking it open. Taking a sip. How is it?
Refreshing. Lemony lime goodness.
Just like the next game.
No, I mean, personally, I would say the drink is probably better than Spot Goes to Hollywood. Maybe that's just me.
I think you'd probably be right. I mean, to be honest, I didn't hate this game, but I have learned I am much more tolerant of early isometric games than the guys seem to be. And this was an early isometric, almost collectathon style game, which kind of surprised me, and I'm a little surprised they didn't draw the comparison. Like, wandering around, poking around the different rooms of different stages and backtracking here and there to find, like, little collectibles so you can get to the exit is very, like, kind of ahead of its time. It's just one of those cases of, but should they have?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I didn't really play more than a few minutes. I was like, yeah, it's more cool Spot, and that's cool.
Okay, so it's not a big secret unless you're new to our community. I was a big Cool Spot fan. We played Cool Spot originally like a couple years ago. And I always had a soft spot for that game. So when Spot Goes to Hollywood got drawn, of course, I would be so excited, except for I have played this game before, like as a kid, obviously, because I was a huge fan of the first one. This game was so disappointing to me then after playing the first one. This is definitely a case where like the sequel is not better than the original. And I still stand by that the first one is way more fun. And it's not just like the isometric view, like Spot Goes to Hollywood goes from like your standard left to right platformer that Cool Spot was to now this isometric view. But it really just, with adult eyes looking back on it or like playing it now, it just seemed very like lazy, and it wasn't put together, I think, with as much like care as the first one, where like the first level when you're on the pirate ship, right? You're just like walking. The pirate ship is like very repetitive, right? You're just walking down the planks of like a pirate ship, and it's the same thing over and over and over again. It's the same enemies. There's nothing new to look at. Whereas in the original ones, like the worlds are quite different. The backgrounds are very colorful. You can see a lot more detail. You can kill the enemies in the first one.
And not have them take 20 hits.
Yeah, like that's ridiculous. Like imagine like, you're 8 years old trying to play this game and you went from beating the first one to now getting the second one, and it's like basically impossible because you can't kill the enemies. So yeah, I was very disappointed with Spot Goes to Hollywood.
I'm sorry, Shawna.
I
The
know,
guys
I was
didn't like
sad.
it either. It did not get NGP.
It did not. It got all no's, and in fact, Dustin said it was awful times 3.
Speaking of games that have at least historically been considered to be legendarily awful, Castlevania II Simon's Quest was brought to us via a rare guest episode with Brian Rigsby of Retro Games Book, who is a really cool dude, and it's really neat to actually have somebody who has like worked in game dev show up on the podcast. That especially is a really rare treat among our guests. I was kind of surprised that in all that time, though, that nobody mentioned, like, it was touched on, like, oh, this game has a bit of a reputation. Nobody really mentioned, like, specifically the Angry Video Game Nerd, and how, like, this was one of the earliest big episodes he did that really solidified him. And it's kind of interesting, like, going back now and everybody realizing, like, wait a second, this was the start of, like, the modern video YouTube essay and review and stuff. Like, that connection that's actually really historically important. But my point is this game has a much worse reputation than it actually is, but I don't think it's that great of a game.
I would agree. I didn't think it was that great. Everything about it kind of just didn't land for me. I already find Classicvania to be a little inaccessible. And then they added in the like Metroidvania cryptic hints thing, and it totally missed me.
It definitely made me rather go see like Nosferatu, which is just in theaters right now, the movie. But there was a couple things that I was interested in because like historically I'm not a huge Castlevania fan. I also find it to be pretty inaccessible. I thought that the and I'm using air quotes here, open world that they tried to portray in this game, I found that to be really interesting because of the constraint, right? It's 1987, so we can't have like as open world as what we are used to today in like, current times. So I thought that was really interesting the way that they were trying to like do that and have, you have to talk to like the villagers, but still make it kind of adventure-y platform. And then I thought like the day-night cycles were pretty interesting for that time because, again, in 1987, I know some of us weren't around yet, but everything video gaming wise used to be, okay, it's whatever time of day the video game is, and that's all it is. There's not like this idea that there's times that change or even like talking to other people in like the village. So I don't know. I was looking at it in like 1987 eyes and being impressed by that. But yeah, I can definitely see, parts of it that aren't really great. Also, it's a Castlevania game and there's no wall meat. So like, what are we doing here? All right. So the next game in the year of weird that we had the mispleasure of playing was the 1989 NES title of Back to the Future, which essentially is We Have Paperboy at Home, the game.
I mean, that's not necessarily wrong.
It's Paperboy but horrible somehow. Like how did you take Paperboy the game and make it worse?
It is pretty impressive how like unplayably bad the game is. But I think what is even more impressive is was it Dustin who completed the entire game?
Did he?
Yeah, he did. I actually sat down to play it and almost ended up finishing the entire game in one go. It was not something I should have wasted my time on, mind you. That was not a great use of my time. Listen, if you didn't listen to the episode, this is a game so bad that Back to the Future's screenwriter is on record as saying it's one of the worst games he'd ever played. It was our community's second least favorite game out of this batch, and honestly, the fact that it was only the second least favorite says something.
Yeah, this was like a borderline unplayable, completely unfun experience, and still somehow not the worst game in this set of titles. Also, bees.
Bees.
So many bees.
Yeah, this one, unsurprisingly, unanimous no vote on this one.
Speaking of time travelers, though, I did want to shout out one thing that amused me listening back to these episodes in preparation, was that during the commentary, Harold listed out a bunch of other games that they could have been playing from that year instead, including Minesweeper.
Foreshadowing.
So anyway, Harold, this is the point where I call you out on air as being a time traveler. I'm revealing your secrets. You can't hide from me.
And I don't believe that Harold would have been ill-advised to learn how to type that comment by playing our next game, The Typing of the Dead.
Heyo.
Unfortunately, you wouldn't learn a lot of skills in typing by playing this game, but it is such a silly, stupid game, and I love it. Although, unfortunately, my typing speed does not love it.
It is worth noting that they treated it as an edutainment game. This is definitely not the game you use to learn to type. It is the game that tests you once you know how to type. And when I say test you, I, historically am at 100, 120 words per minute. I maxed out the difficulty on this game, thinking it would be fine, because I almost never have typing games that actually challenge me at that speed, he said, humbly bragging. I kind of got my butt whooped. It's actually crazy hard when maxed out.
Even at like a 40-50 for me, I couldn't do level the easy mode. I just couldn't play this game hardly at all.
Well, it's because it's in British, number one. So, that probably has something to do with us Americans having a hard time typing because we don't have our British words in our vocabulary.
No, I'm just slow.
Okay, or you could.
I'm Canadian, so I get out of that.
That's what I was saying. I was, you get to have the British words. Yeah, I love this game. But I was thinking a lot about typing speed as well. And actually kind of how antiquated it kind of is, because it used to be something that we would test for. I've worked at jobs where I've had to test people their typing skills, and then I was thinking about all of that while playing this game, and it's does that even apply? So many people just know how to touch type nowadays. Does typing speed even matter? And is that what this game was trying to solve for, was to try to help us improve our typing skills in 2001? So I don't know, I had this whole existential thing in my head while playing this game. Also, I love how the protagonist in this game basically is wearing a keytar style keyboard around his neck
with the Dreamcast on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot of comments over how silly this game was, and how actually, despite what we've been saying, it is an absolutely delightful time. This was, I think, one of the best games we got out of this batch, one of the rare few gems. And Priven mentioned especially loving Nolan gushing over the ridiculous outfits, and just the guys had a blast experiencing this game, and I'm really glad I got the chance to as well. So our next game was Spellforce, the Order of... sorry. You have to understand, my experience with Spellforce, the Order of Dawn, was that I literally fell asleep at my keyboard playing the tutorial. I'm not even joking with you. I jolted awake and realized I had to stop.
Well, Dustin left the first play during the tutorial.
He sure did, and I don't think he played any more of it after that.
I, I'm I think it's going by Barney rules. It probably just played itself.
I know that it was mentioned on the episode that Dustin ended up getting most of his interaction with the game actually watching people let's play it, which, honestly, with RTS being the kind of game that it is, that's probably about as close as you can get to using a guide.
Yeah. One of the things that was really funny about this episode, right? We all knew it wasn't a great game. We weren't having a good time. It kind of makes you want to play like, I don't know, Elden Ring instead or anything else. But whenever, like, I think it was Nolan, whenever he would come up with like, maybe a more critical, like, feedback about the game, Kenny would come in and like soften it and would just kind of like make some excuses for the game. It's just like, no, just Kenny, let it be bad. Let's just let it be a bad game.
It's really funny, too, because even Kenny was like, no, this is not NGP worthy at the end of the episode. And Kenny is the RTS guy of the three of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think it would have hit them, like, if it actually accomplished what it set out to, which was being an RPG RTS, which on paper sounds really good. Like,
Yeah.
even as not an RTS person, if someone made one of those that was really good, like, oh, I don't know, like the Stronghold series comes pretty close to that.
Mhm.
Warcraft 3 is pretty beloved.
Warcraft 3, yeah. Like, those are good. It can be done. This one just didn't.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like this came out in 2003, like, and I'm definitely an RTS person. Like those were like the first games that really captured me as a younger gamer. 2003, like there were good games in these respective genres coming out. So like there's, you know, no reason why this shouldn't have worked back then. And I remember I didn't play this game when it came out. I remember when it came out and it was always on my list of games to play, but after finally getting to it, like it's so disappointing, what this game actually was, because I always was just like, oh, this will be one I'll enjoy. All right, we're gonna skip forward a year to 2004, and we picked up, I believe, our first Game Boy Advance title of this group of games. We played Metroid Zero Mission.
Tied for the community's second favorite game that we got recently. This one was, pretty beloved. I mean, it's a Metroid game. There's only a couple Metroid games that are really all that spicy in terms of people disliking them. I was kind of surprised at how much like Dustin though got hung up on the idea of like contrasting it specifically to the original. Like he was expecting maybe closer to a remaster style as opposed to Zero Mission, which is like if there's like a scale where it's like remaster of just like looks prettier versus like reimagination, this is a completely new game. This is definitely way on the reimagination side of things.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I really love this one, and I think that it kind of defeats any reason to really go back to the first game. I can see an argument that you would still want to go back and play the first one, but I just don't think it's really that fun. We do have an episode on that back in episode 100, I believe, which is worth
back when
listening
one of
to.
the guys was getting married, I think.
I think, yeah, was that the one? No, it was Final Fantasy 1 that was on Kenny's wedding day.
Okay, it was close to one
Nolan's?
of those.
It might have been on his honeymoon or something. Maybe that's what it was. But yeah, Zero Mission is like a flawless game. It's basically like perfect in my mind. It's like my second favorite of the Metroid games, behind Fusion, if that's gonna make people mad. Uh, but yeah, it got a unanimous NGP vote. Unsurprisingly, because it's really good.
Yeah, and at the time, both Kenny and Nolan on the episode said that the game was essentially near perfect. And one thing that I didn't realize and learn during that episode was that I didn't realize that there was such a gap between, um, you know, the Metroid games and then to Prime that eventually came out, and so like this kind of bridged some of that. It definitely makes me respect the franchise a little bit more, knowing how they were able to almost like reinvigorate a franchise and bring in like a whole new audience. Um, so that was like definitely an interesting fact that came out throughout the episode.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
because
kind of just the history of the series, really.
yeah, it
It's like,
was
here's a bunch of games, then nothing. Then the Prime series and Fusion and Zero Mission, then nothing. And then Dread and Prime 4 all of a sudden, like 10 years later. It's what it does.
yeah, the release for Fusion and Prime came out on the same day.
Okay.
But the last Metroid game before that was Super Metroid in like 91, 92. It was really early on the Super Nintendo. And yeah, it was like a decade, and then they released Prime and Fusion on the same day, so they would get new players with the 3D title, and they would get the older players coming back for another 2D Metroid on the Game Boy Advance. And then you, of course, had like the Link content with that, which I believe they talk about in the Fusion episode, which was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, we've played that whole set now. Metroid's quickly becoming one of the series we're like closest to fully completing the checklist of games on, honestly.
Oh,
It
that's
helps when
actually
they've only
interesting.
done like 8 games. Speaking of series without many games, our next title is Hotel Dusk, Room 215. It is a DS title, and like we mentioned at the beginning, it is the newest game that we played in this set. Um, Personally, I had initially bounced off of this game really hard. I did not enjoy it. I found it really slow, and I had tried to play it years ago, and I hit that same wall because it takes, I would say, a few hours to really kind of dig in and get the story rolling. Um, Despite being a really slow burn, I think it's one of my favorite games I've played this year. Um, well, I guess last year, but I haven't finished it yet. I'm on like chapter 8 of 10, and I should be finishing it this week. So by the time the episode comes out, I should have finished it. But it is
Yeah, I was
really
going to say,
good.
there was. Dustin had said he wanted to keep going. Kenny said he wanted to keep going, even though he gave it a no. But that was more in a, I have started this book and I am going to finish it sort of way.
Hmm.
Yes.
And I know there was like a couple other members of the community who kept playing this well after the week concluded.
Yep, I know Shane played all the way through it, and he shared his progress in the past games channel.
Yeah, this game is so unique, and I have it. I want. I have it like primed to like purchase on like eBay, so I have like the actual like cartridge. Um, yeah, there's definitely something about the art style of this game. It's just beautiful. It's like all line work and watercolor. It's a very uniquely designed game. And also just the gameplay of it is a Nintendo DS, right? And so if you're familiar with a Nintendo DS, it opens and closes like a book, and you have to turn your DS in such a way so it's almost like a dreaded peripheral, but your console is the peripheral. That's the book that you're writing in. You have to take notes in it. I don't know, the gameplay to me seems just so like unique and interesting, and the story seemed interesting enough. I can see where it's slow. You know, and you have to kind of take the time and figure out, you know, all the things to do. So it's not very like it's it's very immersive, but not like handholdy, which can make things feel like not super fluid. Um, but yeah, the game is super unique, and I definitely want to like play it on the actual console.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. The DS really was like, I think we've mentioned this discussing like Ace Attorney and Layton and stuff. The DS kind of saw a resurgence or even a birth in the West of the genre of visual novels. But Hotel Dusk isn't one that really gets talked about, probably because unlike a lot of other stuff like those games or Ghost Trick, it doesn't have this big bombastic opening. It is slow at the start, and it is very grounded, and so it doesn't really hook and stand out, even though it tried with its aesthetic sense, and that's a bit of a shame. If you haven't had enough of bad games on the podcast, next up was Ninja Bread Man, the 2005 poster child of the shovelware that emerged on the Wii. I mean, okay, technically, you know, it came out on the PS2 first, they played that version, but like, this game actually became somewhat famous in its time, even if history has largely forgotten it. Almost everywhere was talking about this game because it was just so low effort. It was so clearly just like an unfinished tech demo of a game. And it was being sold in stores. And they didn't even go into this in the episode. It actually made good money because people weren't wary to shovelware yet. And there was just such a big audience on the Wii that was looking for games, and just everybody was mad about it. Even our community was mad about it. This was our community's least favorite game this set, and I don't blame them.
I'm upset that we have to talk about this game any more than we've already given it like space to have a conversation about it. But if we must, we can continue.
Can I say
Yes.
something controversial?
Stop it.
No.
No, you're dismissed. You're not allowed to like this game, Klen.
I wouldn't say I like it, but I would not say it's that bad.
Klen.
Back to the Future was significantly worse.
Yes.
I think they're very bad in two different kind of ways. Back to the Future is at least kind of trying some stuff that is like a little bit sort of more unique to it, not by much, but a little bit doing its own thing, and just ended up doing it poorly. This is very much the standards of 3D platformers, but done absolutely poorly and without like any ideas behind it.
Right. And it's like, it's 2005 that this is released. Like, we should know better by now than like 1987 or whenever Back to the Future came out. Like, this game literally, when I took a look at it, this shouldn't have been sold for money. Like, no one should have given money for this game more than buying a box of cereal, and this just happened to come inside of it.
Listen, you leave Chex Quest out of this.
Like, no, Chex Quest is a great game. We all love it. we all stand for Chex Quest. But I'm just saying, like, that's the level that this game, and this game was Ninja Bread Man. It was probably a $30 title back in the day. Like, someone paid $30 over and over and over and over again for this game, for their kid, for their niece, their nephew, because it looked fun. But when you get down, it's like soulless in the sense that it's a copy and paste of two other games, Rock and Roll Adventures and Anubis 2, and those are probably all $30 games. So you're just like, you know, just grabbing money in these like horrible games. I don't know. I'm also salty because I was hoping that this, when we called this game Ninja Bread Man, for some reason my brain was like, oh, it's a Shrek game with the gingerbread man from Shrek. But it wasn't that, so I'm equally upset about that. Alrighty, so the next game we played is slightly less weird, I guess. So maybe we had a break in the weird weather. was a 1991 NES title. Temco, is it Temco? Temco? How do you say it, Garlyle?
Tecmo.
Tecmo, that's the word. Tecmo Super Bowl, which is a sports game about sports.
Listen, I'm just going to put it on the table. I'm the kind of nerd who has his own podcast about Mega Man. Do you think I know anything about how to handle a sports ball?
No, I don't know how to do it. Klen?
I know a good amount about football, actually.
Good. All right, take it away.
I was kind of surprised. I didn't actually play along it during the week, but I was looking back at Nolan's first play and, like, the way the game works and the way the play system and everything is put together is, like, actually really good. Like, there's a reason that people keep this game up, and they make, like, ROM hacks for current rosters to keep the game relevant. Like, you can still play this today with the 2024 season football stars
That's
and the
interesting.
current teams. Like, this game is still played by many, many people and kept up. Like, all the stats are kept up, and there's some balancing because there are some balancing issues with this game, but it's surprisingly good, enough so that people are still playing it.
That's awesome. I think my favorite part of the whole episode was the chunk, like a literal chunk of time, talking about the variations between man and manual and what that means as far as like the gameplay goes. So, you know, if you like battle of words, like that was a really fun part of the whole episode. Although I do mention like also that there are different modes that you can play this game, and coach mode to me seemed really interesting, where like you didn't necessarily have to play as players, but you could like set up the plays as the coach and like watch it play out in front of you. I don't know how sports games work. I don't know if this is unique to this, you know, this title or not, but I thought that was a cool game feature.
It's not anything I've encountered in any early sports games, but I mean, do you think I play many of them?
It's Super Smash Bros. For the 64.
Oh, come on, say it with some energy. You got a Super Smash!
Super Smash Brothers!
There we go.
Dun 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 dun.
No, that's the new one, but good.
It's good enough.
This
I didn't play
yeah.
this one. I played the other ones.
The other ones instead.
Well, I didn't play any Smash during that week. But it's like, I've played the first one. But I also I have all the other ones.
Yeah. I think so this game, spoiler alert. Actually no, before I spoiler alert it. So this game was picked from the randomizer from the 9-year anniversary show, right? And Unbelievable, who is near and dear to our hearts from the community, this was his game.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. I am like really surprised about how this one landed by not getting New Game Plus. Just because like, you know, I listened to the episode. Actually, I had to go back and like listen to it again because I'm still like, I get it, but I don't really get it because we've given so many like NGPs, like I would like soft NGPs, like we'll give NGP for, you know, the game because of like the history or what it's done for like franchise or whatever. Like we'll give NGP to like titles that just deserve it. And this wasn't one of those. So I don't know. I was like, I just don't even understand how this title didn't get to have NGP.
Like, I partially get it. The thing the guys hooked on during the episode was like, oh, the newer one's kind of obsoleted. The newer one's really...
But that's every
you might have
game.
individual tastes.
That's like all the games.
Yeah, I know. I could especially for fighting games. This is a fighting game. I will fight people who don't like and spacing, tech, mind games, pressure, mix-ups, pretty much everything functional in a fighting game beyond the surface level. There is two dudes in a health bar is present in Smash. Fight me outside the Denny's, you know which one. But like I was making sense. Like there is still a player base for this. There are still people who absolutely love this specific version of Smash because each one does handle very, very differently. But like I want to say I felt like I was losing my mind this episode just listening to it in general and
Yeah.
hearing like Dustin picking characters off of fighting game tier lists when he barely knows how to play. Spoiler, tier lists are not meant for newcomers to the game. They represent what play is like at the highest level, and they're not relevant to low-level play. And also, Dustin getting hung up on C up to jump.
Yeah.
I have to say it, every C button lets you jump, including the C buttons that are right next to your other buttons. It's a completely fine control scheme.
Well, also just think about like how like groundbreaking this title was. You know, and Unbelievable like says it really well in his pitch for this game, where it's just like imagine that you're a kid and you know take yourself back to like 1999. Like I was thinking about this not too long ago, where it's like, you know, if you didn't see a commercial on TV for the game and maybe you didn't get access to like the gaming magazines, like you literally just go to your local like video game rental store or maybe to like, you know, a video game store and like just look at the box art and how much your decision to get a game or not is just based on box art or a picture that you've seen somewhere. And like I'm like right there with Unbelievable. I remember that commercial of like the fuzzy Nintendo characters walking in the field, holding hands 1 second, and it's like, you know, playing that, you know, Imagine Me and You game or song. And then all of a sudden they just start beating each other up. And it was just this like crazy thing to see. And then be able to say, oh my gosh, that's going to be a game. Like I can do that with my friends. And it being like this first in like, you know, essentially like in video gaming history or Nintendo video gaming history. I don't know. It just seems very odd to me that even with that, we would say no.
I mean, it was one way or another. It was a very controversial episode. Like, of the most direct comments that I got from people, like asking for specifically memories of these last few episodes, this one kept coming up. Some people just amazed at the amount of controversy and like the almost fights, not literal fights, not Denny's parking lot fights. That's what I do. But the you know, pleasant discussions people had in the aftermath of the game, and some people actually being glad it didn't get NGP, and like it was certainly the hot point of this set of episodes. Next up, to cool us off after all of that, and to let me get off my soapbox, we have System Shock 2, the 1999 PC classic that was a director episode with Bill, but not like that Bill, the Whiskey Dictionary Bill that's been with us forever, the other Bill. How many Bills do we have in this community?
At least 2.
Well, this was Bill R, so I think that's what, like 18?
Something like that.
If we're going alphabetically, I think, yeah.
This is one of those good old-fashioned immersive first-person Sims, this time with a bit of a horror vibe in space. And unlike the last time we did it, Deus Ex, my computer actually rendered the lighting in this game, so I was able to play it.
Yeah, I like the edgy sci-fi vibes. It also like just takes you back to a different, you know, time in video gaming. It was very like late 90s, early 2000s sci-fi. And it was also, you know, coming back to the director's episode, like I love when we ask directors like what led them to choose the game that they bring to us. I really loved Bill's answer that basically was saying that the other games he would have chosen have already been played on the show. So we've been around so long that like people's top picks of games, it's like you're down to like, your third favorite game now before coming onto the show?
One of these
470 episodes now.
one of these days someone's gonna finally pick Super Mario 64.
One of these days, we're finally going to get a Donkey Kong Country game.
Maybe someday.
Oh.
No, we're gonna play all of the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games first.
All right. Well, the next game we played was all the way back in 1985, our first arcade entry for this group of games. So, arcade and NES title Russian Attack, co-hosted by Garlyle. You joined us that week in replacement of Nolan. I believe Nolan had
Off
joined
to
the
war.
military
Yep.
that week. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm still not sure what happened to him. I don't think I ever got an answer about that. Fortunately, his term was short, so he came back the next week. But this was... We talked earlier about games that it's like, I'm amazed the guys could actually do a whole episode on it. I won't lie, when Dustin asked me to do it for this episode, I'm like, wait a second. Like, I played the game and I'm like, how are we going to do an entire episode on this? Because it's like a 10-minute game if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. I was also this was the first time you've co-hosted like regular episodes a handful of times by now, Garlyle. This was the first one where you got to actually have a deciding factor.
Yeah, and the first time I said no to it, and just because like it's just not one of those games that has any particular reason to go back and play, which is kind of a shame because I know it was a little bit popular back in the day, but like some games just deserve to fade out, I think.
Well, it was 1985, and I think we at that point only had like 2 games to play. So, but also it was, it's very Cold War. Like you forget, or you weren't born yet, like how just inundated everything in like entertainment. Like we were so just immersed in like Cold War, like games and shows and movies and books and comics and cartoons and like all sorts of stuff. Like when we pulled this title, to me it was just it's like so in your face it was so in your face all the time during that time that you just kind of, it just washes over you. Like it's just fades into the background, I guess. I don't know. That's what these types of titles are to me. Like they don't stand out. They're just like, they're just kind of there.
Yeah, this was one of the rare NGP games that I actually own. Like I have a physical copy of this one.
Wow.
Which would be great, except it's not really worth playing.
But I believe the cartridge was worth something, right? Because I have my notes say that the cartridge was more expensive than like the actual arcade cabinet.
That
Probably if it was brand new.
Probably.
Yeah, if it was new. But I do have like the manual too. But
Ooh.
alrighty, prospectors, we're on to our next game. It's Gold Rush for the PC.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw!
Yeehaw!
This is an old school Sierra PC title. It is a text parser specifically, which means it's terrible to play. I personally played this for 10 minutes and then I shut it off. I uninstalled it. I banned those words from my computer.
Got the refund on Steam.
I did get the refund on Steam. Me and Shane both did the refund route. Yeah, this
10 minutes is way too long.
It was. I wish I'd played less. This is some of the least fun I have had playing a game in a long time. And like we said before, Nolan had a very good first play on this one as well.
Yeah, and this is another one of those titles. If you didn't get a chance to like look at it, this is another one of those MS Paint designed games. This one had a little bit more fidelity than LSD, and probably a little bit more colors were fused than in Russian Attack. But it's still highly largely pixelated. It doesn't look good, and it's, I would say, nearly impossible to play if you were just, to plug the game in and just try to play. It's pretty impossible.
I don't feel like it's impossible, but getting into that mindset for text parser games, like there is still a crowd for them. There are still games being made with them,
Sure.
but it is a very distinctive method of play, and one where like thinking to do things is like, it sounds really weird to say that you have to get out of that mindset of limited things you can do and have to actually think about yourself in the world in a
Mhm.
way you don't in a lot of games. But like, that is a big blockade that I think limits a lot of people from enjoying it. And ironically, I find it works better when everything is text as opposed to the text and graphics, because you have a better understanding of what's actually there because it has to be described to you, as opposed to just like, oh, I should look at the floor in this random location, and I guess here's different.
Right. And for context, like I used to play Zork a lot, which is like all completely
Yep.
like text based.
Get eaten by a Gru.
Yeah. And like, yeah, like Zork seemed more accessible to me than this game did.
Yeah, this was terrible to play because it was like it was hard enough to figure out like where do I need to go, like which building and like which people do I have to interact with and how do I like talk to them or where is my house? And when I finally got to my house, I was like, okay, let me look around. And it's like, oh, you have a kitchen table, but it doesn't describe that like no, it's not just the kitchen table, like there's a memoir in there and you have to like know it's a memoir and then type in like open the memoir and look at the pictures and open the desk and look in the desk and open the left cupboard drawer in the kitchen. It's like
And then you
you
ran out of
des-
time.
yeah, like you didn't describe any of that to me, so how am I supposed to know to like look at any of that?
Yeah.
It's just
It doesn't help either that it's a Sierra game, and like somebody brought up, there was like a sliding scale of cruelty in game design from old adventure designs of like, on the low end of the scale is like you walk across the rickety bridge, the game warned you that it was rickety, of course you fall off and die, versus like, oh, you walk across the bridge but you forgot this key that you didn't know was back before the bridge, and when like 3 hours later you find out you need this key, you try to walk across the bridge again and now it crumbles and die and you've actually been in an unwinnable state this entire time. That is the level that Sierra games are on in
Yep.
their design.
Yeah.
and this one was notoriously bad for that if I remember right.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of games that did get NGP, fortunately, which is important given how much of a classic 1992's Minesweeper is. We're talking, like, you've played this game. Somehow not the most played along game in our community. That was somehow Metroid Zero Mission over this, and I don't know how. It's Minesweeper. How have you not played Minesweeper? How did you not find Minesweeper to play along this week?
I lost my mind when we pulled this game. I was so excited. I'm excited now to talk about it again, actually. Like this I think is probably the best game we played, maybe, like out of all of these. And
wouldn't-
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I didn't lose
Yeah.
my mind, but I did accidentally lose 6 hours when I tried to play it.
Okay, well,
So
I think it's one of those like nostalgia bombs, like where you just kind of had to be there a little bit as well. But also mentioning too is that very rightly so, Kenny did the first play for this one, and it's literally I think titled like Minesweeper Tutorial 2024. So hopefully we get lots of views on that one. But to watch Kenny in his like true environment was very inspiring to watch.
It was amazing. I just finally watched it today and it is so good. Kenny just like full confidence. I love it.
He schools you.
I got way too into Minesweeper during that week and like the week after, and it like had a severe impact on my work efficiency and like my sleep schedule. I I was like racing. I was trying to get my times down on all the different difficulties. Like
Yeah, there was a few of us in the community doing that.
I got down to a 7-second easy mode clear.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So the next game we played, we're back over to PlayStation, and we played Crash Bandicoot. Not Bandicoot. Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back. And then Dustin also wanted us to note here that we've unlocked some new Kenny lore, that he is a belly button guy, because we spent quite a bit of time talking about Mr. Bandicoot's belly button during this episode.
I'm gonna forget I heard that.
Yep. I had never paid it any attention before, and I will continue to not.
It is a black hole belly button.
If you were curious, by the way, this was the community's favorite game as they voted prior to this episode, at almost a third of the total votes, which is pretty wild.
Wow.
I can see that.
Apparently, about a third of the people were Crash kids growing up, PlayStation kids.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've never met anybody who grew up a Nintendo kid who really loved Crash.
So I didn't for the longest time, but I had only played Crash 1. Coming to this game, I kind of fell in love with it. And part of that, I think, people had described that the Insane Trilogy, the remaster, really messes up the physics for like the first 2 games, and that really causes issues on the first game. Which might be one of the reasons I didn't have a good time with it. But this one, I really got into like replaying the levels, doing the deathless runs, trying to get all the gems. Like, it just really worked for me, and I think part of that might have been just the level length felt shorter than 1.
Shorter and a lot more forgiving. Like, just in general, this game is a lot kinder in general than the first one was, and was significantly more enjoyable as a result.
Except for the ice.
Oh, yeah, Psycho Mantis in particular mentioned getting great delight watching Dustin struggle with the ice physics, and like, I get the struggle. They're some of the most extreme ice physics I think I've seen in a platformer.
Well, we definitely had our patented Dustin like screech yelling about the ice. He went from like 0 to enraged very quickly with the ice physics, and it was a fun time, not for him, but for us to watch.
This next one is interesting for at least one reason. The next game was Tiny Toon Adventures for the NES. The reason I say it's interesting is because Tiny Toon, spelled Toon, is actually like a weird differentiation from its greater Looney Tunes counterpart, which spells Toon Tune. Because Looney Tunes was originally like a way to introduce kids to classical music.
Yep.
I just found that interesting.
And the word cartoon as an animated thing wouldn't have really been nearly as like prevalent at the time that actually started. So it sort of makes sense, but I can see why the guys got hung up on it on the episode.
Yeah, there was a big chunk of the episode just talking about the linguistics between Toon and Tunes, and like the Warner Brothers, like Bugs Bunny, like those guys, the TUNES, the tunes, musical tunes. I think also in Klen, and maybe in your research you saw this, but like the counterpart to that on the Disney side, they had the Merry Melodies, and like that was like
yeah.
their thing. So it was like all this like musical animated shorts that they would play.
It's really funny to spend all this time on how that's named, though. Only for the guys in the episode to just completely lose the plot on what every single character was named in the show.
I know.
They just had this moment of just like, oh yeah, we'll call the best character on 3, and Nolan just completely forgot the name, said something Kevin or something,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was it. The names were gone. And at this point, we'll slip away from all the games that we've been playing to talk about a little bit of a special episode that slipped in, which became a community favorite real fast. We're talking like 40% of the vote on people's favorite episode. The Christmas Cast, in which our former editor, Tom, brought in Jeopardy for the guys to play. And he was all like, don't worry, Dan, there's no sound effects or anything. You'll have an easy editing time. And Dan was like, oh, I'll take that as a personal challenge.
That was amazing.
I love Dan.
I love Dan too. I love Tom Tate as well. There's a few things that we do as a community or as a podcast that I just like live for. The Christmas Cast is one of them. Obviously, Summer Pool Party. Like, I love Summer Pool Party. It's like my other favorite thing that we do. But there's something about the Christmas Cast where it's just so fun. And historically, it's been Tom brings us fabulous trivia. Usually it's like Christmas trivia. And I think, isn't it normally like Kenny just kind of like dominates the Christmas trivia?
Well,
Kenny was dominating it. Then it became more about the games that they played that
Right.
year, and Nolan took over, I think.
Yep.
Right. And so now there's like this power play of like who's gonna win it. And I don't know. I really love the direction that we've been like going. I love the Christmas questions, but I also love the game questions because it's kind of fun. We can play along too. But yeah, I live for the Christmas Cast. All right, the next game we played, back over to the Game Boy Advance. We have a 2002 title, which I feel like I shouldn't be the one announcing this one, but we have Mega Man Zero.
I mean, I could have been the one to do it, but I've already talked my butt off about that. See my podcast for further information.
I know, right? Like, what more can we say? Let's just drop in Garlyle's whole episode about this game, just right here.
Yeah, Dan.
This episode will be long enough.
Yeah.
Dan edited
make
in the entirety of that episode.
Yeah, Dan, make it 2 hours long. The one thing that I do want to say, and obviously it's not like super deep on this game because I know, Garlyle, you are just the be all end all of like Mega Man knowledge and content, and you guide us through all the Mega Man stuff. One thing I really loved about this game is how the overall look was. I loved like the chunky sprites on this title, and just overall like how everything looked really good to me.
Yeah, I've always loved this game. It was like my introduction to Mega Man as a franchise. Like basically my first Mega Man game, which in a lot of ways is really bad. Because it's very unforgiving. Like it kind of in a lot of ways doesn't represent the series, but it's also really fun. Like the weapon switching and the Z-Saber are just like phenomenal, and that intro sequence is just... And of course, finally, we are catching up to the end of our recap with our last game in this set, Saturn Bomberman for, you guessed it, the Sega Saturn.
No, really?
I know, it threw me off too. I will just say, I do not appreciate it. I do not tolerate it. Dustin needs to stop slandering the 64 Bomberman games. I'm just glad that Dustin found a Bomberman game he enjoys, and I'm glad that he correctly thinks that Bomberman is a cute little fella.
Bomberman is a cute little fella, and the Bombermans are so fun. I love the Yoshis, the little dinosaurs that you get. 10 out of 10 adorable. This is my style of Bomberman for sure, this like original style. But I have nothing wrong with the 64 version either. You just got to get with the times. The times, they are a change-in sometimes, and you have to have different perspectives.
We were joking earlier about playing all the Donkey Kong games except the country games, but like Bomberman's kind of been one of those series where the only times that the guys have touched it have been on the weird, like, non-standard gameplay side game type of design before. This was genuinely the first time in 470 some odd episodes that we've gotten a classic Bomberman.
And I kid you not, there are like 12 or 13 of them on the Retro Master list.
Oh,
That
so
doesn't even surprise me.
we're in for a treat.
Super Bomberman 4 win. Although,
Could you imagine, like, if we just started pulling, like, Bomberman after Bomberman after Bomberman, and, like, you have, like, 5 of them all in a row? It'd be great.
I mean, that would be interesting, but only for so long. The classic Bomberman games are honestly only so different from one another. Like, the guys actually asked me specifically on the episode what my favorite is. It's Super Bomberman 5, and it's specifically because it has a non-linear campaign where you have different exits to different stages, and like playing through the game, you'll fight different bosses and stuff each time. And that's like the defining feature of that game is just that one thing. Otherwise, it's very, very similar.
guess what? That is not unique, because Max 2 on the GBA is the same way.
Oh. Okay, well, I'm going to have to go play that.
And that one's my favorite for that reason, too.
I do have a question, though, that I just haven't had time to really, like, look into. And I've always understood, like, Bomberman as, like, a Nintendo IP. How did Sega swing getting it for the Saturn?
It seems like it was a Nintendo IP, but it actually wasn't. Hudson Soft, I think like the original ones were like PC 98.
Yep.
I want to say like it is a very old series that didn't necessarily have ties to Nintendo, so it kind of went everywhere.
The reason that it feels like Bomberman is a Nintendo IP is because Hudson Soft would eventually become a part of Nintendo officially. And they're the ones who did, like, they did a lot of work on Smash Brothers and things like that, along with Intelligent Systems, which also would come over and join Nintendo. But originally, yeah, they were third parties, so they went, like, all over the place.
Awesome. That's really interesting. Yeah, that was like the first question that like really like stuck, and I was like, how did that happen?
Well, I had an answer for you.
I love that you had an answer for me. Like that is fabulous. One thing that I did want to like point out though about this episode was that one of the comments, like this game did get New Game Plus unanimously. All the guys all said yes, as they should have. But Kenny noted that it's repetitive. Kenny likes Minecraft, and that is literally the most repetitive game as well. So when he said that it's like, you know, it's a repetitive game, I was like, what? How?
Did you mean to say Minesweeper?
Oh, sorry, Minesweeper, not Minecraft. The guys did that on.
Okay, the guys did that on the episode.
I know.
Everybody's done that one. All right. So we've been running long, but that is the 20 episodes that we've passed. Well, 21, whatever. Some quick touchstones to finish us off. I want to ask what the favorite game you personally played was, what your least favorite game was, and what your favorite episode was, if you happen to have had answers ready for that.
I did this time.
Huzzah! Then why don't you start us off?
Awesome. My favorite game was Bomberman's. My least favorite game, there was a tie, but I would say that what was it called? Gold Rush was my least favorite. And my favorite episodes were Minesweeper and the Christmas Cast.
It's a tough choice for me. I would have probably said Metroid Fusion for my favorite, but after playing more of Hotel Dusk, I think that one might have snuck in as my favorite now.
Oh, especially because it flipped you.
It did, and like the same things happened for a couple other games, like Resident Evil 4 did the same thing. My least favorite game is easy Back to the Future. Gold Rush is definitely up there, but Back to the Future was just like it was miserable, like it made me mad. It made me question if I liked video games or like Back to the Future, like do I even like movies? Um my favorite episode, that one's tough. It was probably the Bomberman one, because it was just really nice to see Dustin have like good things to say about Bomberman for once and like be excited about it. Especially in the first play, like he just kind of fell in love with it, and that was nice because I didn't get that on my director episode.
Aw. Redemption.
He's just a
So
little guy.
Yeah. Personally, my favorite game to play was Typing of the Dead. I'd never actually played the original, and that game was just so silly and joyful and such a good time to experience. The complete opposite of Spellforce, a game so bad that, like I said, it literally put me to sleep. Like, I don't think I can, as much as I may not have liked something like Ninja Bread Man, at least I stayed awake for them. And I think my favorite episode also has to go for Typing of the Dead, because the guys were just having such fun with the game and with the episode that it really shone through. Next important question. Our next game is Command & Conquer Red Alert, chosen in a Patreon pool. I'm curious how you guys think the guys will land on this one.
Nolan's gonna hate it, although he's gonna try his best. Kenny's gonna love it. And I think Dustin will be our wild card, but I think ultimately he'll like it.
I think exactly the same.
It's not just the two of you either. That's actually completely in line with what our community's been guessing. Almost overwhelmingly yes expected from Dustin, almost largely no from Nolan, and nobody has any clue what's going to happen with Dustin. But hey, until then, if you liked what you heard this episode, you should come by and let us know on Discord. Go to the NGP website at discord.gg/newgameplus, and there's a whole bunch of bonus content there. Like, if you haven't, there's the whole new expansion pack episodes, which feature not just the guys, but also other community member call-ins talking about a whole bunch of stuff we're passionate about in video games. There's even one that I would like to promote, but it's literally being recorded tomorrow and will be out before this episode comes out, which is going to be all about outstanding video game music, where people are bringing some of their favorite tracks. And if you want to listen to that, you gotta jump on the Patreon. And if you do, you'll be joining the likes of our increasingly tongue-twister-sized list of producers: Alex, Amarlian, Android 440, Antonin, Ben, Bill R, Craig, Dagonet, myself, Guardian Cade, Halix, Harold, Hey Brother, J Robert, Jake Jordan, George Binks, Justin, Klen, Levi Maxima, Megatroid, Miss Muso, Not Enough Dog, Radmac, Metroman, Sajin Sasser, Scotty Shane, Shawna, Snake Matic, Swaggy Tacofish, Psycho Mantis, Thomas Tins, Turtle, Unbelievable, and Zion. And our oh-so-beloved directors: Brogem, Dustin's 5 O'Clock Shadow, Scorch 57,204, Super Hypered, and Siegfried, some of whom I know are new, and I cannot wait to hear about your episodes and see what games you're bringing, and we'll be talking about them next time. No pressure, though. Don't panic. No stress.
Thank you all.
As always, a huge thank you to Dustin, Kenny, and Nolan for everything you do. Hope you enjoyed this week off. And a big thanks to Dan Willett for editing the vocal cast, and Dylan for the video cast, and Dave for continuing to make the most scarring thumbnails possible. I'm so glad I get to see those every week. That's only half sarcasm. If you want more of the guys, you probably know the drill. Make sure you're subscribed on your podcast platforms of choice, or ready to stop by ngppodcast.com every, Sunday at midnight, Monday, 3 a.m. East Coast, etc., for the most recent and the oldest episodes. I just got the time wrong. Whatever. Nobody listens this far into the episode. We're in the outro. The regular host will be back next time with a Command & Conquer Red Alert. Until next Retro Recap, I've been Not Dustin.
And I've been Not Kenny.
And I'm not Nolan.
And this has been New Game Plus.